You're listening to RetRead Podcast. I'm Anna.
I'm Serge, and we're here to talk about books we've read.
Hope you enjoy. Hey, Serge.
Hey, Anna.
What's up?
Well, we're recording yet another episode of RetReads, and tonight we're going to be talking about R.L. Stine's Fear Street novel, Missing.
Missing 411?
Yeah,
David Paulides?
Yeah. Those of you listening to other podcasts out there, you may know what we're talking about. Anyway, but before we get into that...
There's a short story that you just read, right?
There is, and you also read it too.
I read it way too long ago.
Oh.
Sorry.
And I believe it's called...
The Last Machine in the Solar System by Matthew Isaac Sobin. We actually read the ARC, which was given to us by NetGalley, so thank you so much to the publisher and NetGalley for that.
Yeah, thanks for that. It was a great opportunity. Actually, I really enjoyed reading this story. I don't know what to call it. It's not a short story. Called it a novelette.
Well, actually, when I read this book a few weeks ago, I realized that, you have a stronger foundation of sci-fi or Asimov specifically than I do. And as soon as I read this, I figured, I think I should have Serge read this because it would definitely speak more to him.
You really sold it to me, and I was like, you know what? I'm interested in this. I'm intrigued. I took the time out of my busy day to read this 80-page novelette, and it was interesting. You mentioned Asimov. Definitely, I feel the influence there. The author is definitely steeped in the classics here. You get echoes of the great Asimov overarching storyline of Robot and Foundation series. Basically, the way this story works is you have a sentient robot android has been constructed by a human being, and the robot's name is Jonathan. He was built by Nikolai, who is a genius in a far distant future of Earth, like 2 billion years from now. Guess what? Humans are still around, and they're still being human-like. And Jonathan is this misunderstood genius. Nikolai has discovered a theory that he calls the creativity quotient. He has always been a man of two worlds, a physicist, but he's also really into the arts, and he is a master violinist. Despite his virtuosic violin skills, he has found himself unable to compose a masterpiece. And he's very frustrated by this. He decides, you know what? There must be a scientific approach to this. And in fact, it turns out there is. There is actually a scientific approach, a theory, if you will, that answers the question of creativity. And this theory could actually hold the key to all of mankind's potential. It's a really great discovery, and he ends up deriving this theory. He publishes it, and of course, he's ridiculed. Nobody understands. The scientific world is not ready to accept a connection between a unifying theory of physics and the human creative force. Basically, he's just laughed out of the room. Nobody accepts that this could be the case. Not to be deterred, undaunted, he decides he's going to prove himself right. So he applies the theory of the creativity quotient, crafts a masterwork composition for violin. This piece, this orchestral piece, takes the world by storm and is performed in all the great concert venues, some of which he himself has performed in as a soloist in previous times. It's just critically renowned. It is an amazing, amazing piece of music. And then he submits his theory again, and he says, look, Exhibit A, I applied creativity quotient theorem, and I was able to compose this piece of music. I, who has not been able to compose anything up till now. And, of course, the scientific community soundly rejects it. Once again, they do not believe his theory. And so he is heartbroken, and he attempts his one last great project. He's going to create an android that will outlast all of humanity, which he now sees has no hope. And this is that android's story. This is the story of Jonathan.
Yeah, so you see the entire story from the point of view of Jonathan. He's basically built to outlive the death of humanity, Earth, Mars, the solar system in general, because the sun will go nova. So basically you witness his birth, experiences on Earth, on Mars, and eventually billions of years later when the sun becomes a white dwarf. Mm-hmm. And you get a lot of social commentary from him, a lot of his observations that he made while dealing with humans and after finishing every single book ever written.
Actually, so the book can be divided into 3 parts. The first part Buyout is a really kind of retrospective view of Jonathan's own feelings. And mostly, he talks about his great sadnesses. And he's had two great sadnesses in his life. The first sadness was when his creator, Nikolai, passed away. And the second sadness, when he finished reading the entire compiled written works of all humanity. And he goes into this. He's been programmed with every single piece of written language that humanity has put out over their multiple billions of years of history. Despite being a supercomputer capable of processing information faster than any human could, he has been trying to read this as slowly as possible to put off the inevitable end, trying to process and savor every bit to its fullest potential. And finally he gets to the end and there's nothing left. He's fully processed and assimilated all of human creative output, and he feels a great sadness. And he juxtaposes two questions. First of all, why do I feel so sad now when I have just witnessed the end of all humanity, and yet I did not feel sad then? That actually brings up another question. Am I selfish? I did not care for the death of all of these living beings, and I only feel sadness because I have lost my one source of pleasure? It's a very introspective question. After this, he launches into a description of his history, where he talks about how he was created by Nikolai and his years on Earth, followed by his years on Mars, followed by his long exile in the outer solar system, self-imposed, and then finally how he witnesses the end of humanity. The book ends with him completing his mission that was set out for him by Nikolai, and it's a very interesting ending where the author touches upon themes of free will, as well as interesting religious connotations that are kind of inexplicable. I'm not sure it's really touched upon anywhere else in this work, and maybe they seem a little bit incongruous, but maybe not, in light of the Asimov connection. I really enjoyed the work. It's very reminiscent of, again, like I mentioned, the Foundation series and the Robot series of Isaac Asimov. The whole creativity quotient seems to harken back to the theory of psychohistory. Jonathan really reminds me of R. Daniel Olivov, the famous robot of Asimov, except that his role seems to be switched, where the human being in this story is actually the inventor of the theory, whereas the robot is the one that carries out the human being's actions, whereas in Asimov it's the other way around. Other than that, the parallels are very striking. The language of the story is a little bit more pretentious and self-absorbed and philosophical than what Asimov wrote. His writing was more down to earth, but overall I had a very, very positive impression of this novelette. I would definitely give it a 5 out of 5. I would recommend this. I would recommend this to anybody who's a fan of science fiction. This is classic that harkens back to the old days of the 1950s when we had Heinlein and Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke writing all those classics. That was some good stuff.
I gave it 4 stars out of 5 stars. I did think the pretentiousness was a bit annoying after a while to read.
Yes.
It's a bit overbearing. The author did say that he wants to make this a full novel eventually, and I do know that it's probably not going to be from the perspective of Jonathan the entire time, so that will be more bearable. But like Serge had said, highly recommend to anyone who likes sci-fi, which is why I recommended it to Serge.
Yeah. When Anna first described this novelette to me, I was like, how can you make a novel out of this? This doesn't seem like a novelable story. Now that I've read it, listen, Asimov made like 50 novels out of this, so I think this guy's gonna be fine.
One major plot hole that really bothered both of us, I think, was continental drift and the non-existence of it.
Right, so basically, the lifespan of this robot is giving us about 2.5 billion years, so we're about 5 billion years away from the sun spanning to a red giant and obliterating the solar system. That means that this robot is created about 2 billion years from now. When he's described as visiting the different landmarks on Earth, they seem pretty much the same as they are today, and that would actually not be the case given continental drift rearranging the continental landmasses in the intervening time. I read the author's bio at the end of this arc, and apparently he took some geology classes in college. Dude, really? Really?
Yes, but aside from that, we gave a highly recommend, which I don't think we've ever done in this podcast.
Yeah, it's our first.
So a high recommend to anyone who loves classic sci-fi for The Last Machine in the Solar System by Matthew Isaac Sobin. And that should be out for everyone April 11th of this year, 2017.
Yeah, guys, get this. This is good stuff. Now, moving on.
After the intermission, we will be talking about Fear Street Missing.
411.
Hey, David Pilatus. welcome back.
Yeah, hey, now we're going to be talking about missing. First of all,
Let's talk about predictions.
I got something right this time around. I said that they would run into the woods to rescue the parents, and then the real scary stuff would go down, and I was right about that. Although, I have to say, yes, the real scary stuff did go down, but before they ran into the woods to rescue their parents, they already witnessed like 2 murders, so I don't know. There's some really scary stuff that happens even before that point. I gotta say, Anna definitely got the murder weapon right.
Yeah, I said it was going to be a gun, specifically a handgun.
Exactly, and a man gets murdered by a handgun, although there's another murder weapon that neither one of us got.
Who could get that? Well, we know now.
Yeah, and then I believe you got one other thing correct about this?
Murderer would be a male.
Yep, that's right. And I thought it was going to be a female, and I was wrong. It was not a female. There were no female murderers.
Yeah, so let's just say there's going to be a lot of spoilers. Just go from there.
Yep, this is a big spoiler review.
Also, like the previous book, there's no prologue. It goes right into the main story, so you don't really know what's going on, what murder, or anything. You just jump right in.
In the previous books, you always see it from one principal character's point of view, and then in a couple of the books, we saw 1 or 2 chapters from another character's point of view, but in this book, we get something very different, where there's an even 50-50 split between the 2 main characters.
Yeah, so you get Cara for a few chapters, and then you'll get Mark for a few chapters, but it's always the same amount of chapters. So it starts out, I think you get 3 chapters with Cara, 3 chapters with Mark, and then later they'll switch maybe 1 chapter for each character.
Yeah, and it was weird because those first 3 chapters, you don't know her name. So you know Mark's name, but nobody ever calls her by name. You don't know she's Cara. And then you have to wait for Mark's chapters, and he's like, Cara, and then you find out her name. I thought that was very interesting.
Plot synopsis.
Cara and Mark just moved to Fear Street. Their parents go missing.
Yeah, so their parents work as mainframe computer installers. They have to move a lot because once they get done installing their mainframe, they have to go to another company and install a different mainframe. Both Cara and Mark have taken different approaches to this. One has become kind of like
hardened to the moving process.
Yeah, kind of cynical. And the other one has kind of just become like blank and just like going with the flow and accepting of everything. You know, that's just their own coping mechanisms, I feel, for, you know, how they were brought up. But actually, they both describe their parents as being okay.
Cara describes her parents as young people who didn't actually want kids and who probably didn't do the greatest job because they were always out partying or hanging out with friends. So she actually has some resentment there.
Anyway, so their parents go missing.
And it becomes an adventure where the 2 of them try to find their parents, find out what happened. The questions keep piling on. They have a cousin who lives with them in the attic, and he's just acting weirder and weirder.
At one point, they tried several different avenues. So at first, they're having a party because their parents are just really late coming back, and one thing leads to another. Cara invites a couple friends over, and then they invite some people, and then Mark's girlfriend comes over, and it just turns into this wild night.
Guess who else was there?
Corey and Lisa.
And Dave.
And Dave, yeah. You know, everyone's just having a good time. But actually, Cara is really worried because the parents aren't home yet. It's already past 11. But everyone else is having a good time. The police show up at the door. Apparently, there have been some robberies reported. And a Captain Faraday and gives her his business card and says, "This is my direct line. If you have any problems, just call me." Corey pulls a dumb prank with fake vomit. And it's really kind of stupid. She calls him out on it and then kicks everybody out. Mark and Cara both agree they're really worried that their parents are gone. They talked to Roger about it, who's the quote-unquote student, who's also their cousin, who's staying over, and
he goes to college in the next town over.
But you know what? The thing is, he's sounding really suspicious, as you mentioned before. They are still worried about their parents. They go check out their parents' room. It's weird because the bed is unmade. They find like a weird monkey skull.
Rhinestone eyes that glow in the dark.
In the bed. And just as they're like looking at this monkey stone, they notice somebody else is in the room, and guess what? Roger's there. He's hiding behind the curtains. Super suspicious. They also notice a gray van parked outside. Later in the night, Mark notices Roger running out to the van and going inside.
So let's start talking about the characters before we fully go into the plot.
Okay, fine.
So Cara is the younger sister. She's the one that's a bit hardened to the moving, but she's become really good friends with Lisa and Shannon.
That's right, yeah. You know, she's very cynical. She doesn't trust people. She tends to suspect ulterior motives, and she isn't, you know, very gullible. She's not gonna fall fall for anything. And you see this in the party. Like, she doesn't fall for anything. She doesn't fall for any kind of BS. She can see right through any lie, and that's basically her main defining characteristic.
Until the end, where she actually did fall for something.
That's true. We talked about how she's already made really good friends with Lisa, even though she just moved here 2 weeks ago. Did we mention that their parents moved to Fear Street? This is like brought up in the first page of the book, and immediately you do a facepalm and you go, why? Why would you move to Fear Street? This is such a bad idea. It happens. I guess people just move to Fear Street.
They said they probably moved to Shadyside because the schools are good, which we found out in the previous book. Yeah, the schools are really great.
Yeah, they got all kinds of clubs and activities. You don't have a lot of money. I guess you could move into a cruddy neighborhood and still send your kids there.
But there's probably a reason they moved to Fear Street.
Yeah.
So you find out in the end why they moved to Fear Street.
Yeah, there's some kind of a proximity going on over there.
Yeah.
A proximity alert.
Yeah, Cara's a pretty cool character. She actually follows the trend that I've noticed in the main female characters in these Fear Street books, where she's just a total badass.
Yeah, she's pretty cool, although her brother Mark is pretty badass as well. I think they get that from their parents. What do you think?
There's some Mr. and Mrs. Smith thing going on there.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so Cara decides that she's going to be Nancy Drew, similar to Meg in The Surprise Party. When they're suspicious of Roger, she just follows him to a diner. I mean, she gets caught by him. No, they're not Nancy Drew guys. She gets caught, and then she, like, goes home. And there's this, like, whole thing where she's really on it, and it's really great.
Yeah, her one downfall was what you mentioned earlier, was she did not see through one person's bullshit. And that was...
I think that was because of the fear.
Yeah.
She just wanted that one person to trust.
Fear Street will do that to you.
Yep.
Are we ready to move on to Mark?
Yeah, so her brother Mark is older than she is. He's a very, very serious, stoic kind of guy.
And he's a big worrier.
He's a big worrier.
And
he likes Star Trek, though.
Yeah, I love this. This warmed my heart because now finally R.L. Stine is, I guess, atoning for his sins, and he has a main character that loves the Star Trek, has watched the original series 4 times.
Some episodes only twice, though.
No, I think that's the Next Generation.
Oh, yeah.
The Next Generation, he's only watched twice over.
Next Generation just started at this point.
Yeah, I know. It's only 1990, so you figure he's gonna watch it probably a lot.
And the first few seasons of Next Gen wasn't even good, so...
And he's already watched it twice.
Right? What a weirdo.
Anyway, he's described as an athletic guy who's kind of big and strong. He's into archery, which he's not described as being in the archery club or anything. He just kind of practices it by himself in the backyard, which is kind of creepy, actually. And even the neighbors are kind of put off by it. But you know what? Hey, maybe he just belongs on Fear Street. That just seems to go hand in hand with the whole mythos of creeps living on that street, right?
He's never had a girlfriend before until they moved to Fear Street. So he makes a friend. Her name is Gina.
Yeah, and their parents. This is the major plot point to kick off the book, is that their parents really disapprove of the relationship, and they get in a big fight about it the morning that the parents disappear.
What's weird about this argument is that usually when the parents make arguments against something, they give cogent reasons as to why. They'll give you a list and say, well, it's because A, B, C, D, E, etc., etc. But for Mark and Gina, they basically just said, well, we don't like it, and didn't give any reasons, which Cara thought was pretty weird.
And it really flipped Mark off. He just went off the handle and got in a big shouting match with his dad, and it got a little bit out of hand.
What really struck me about that scene was that I think she was eating Pop-Tarts, and it really struck me to the point where when I went grocery shopping this week, I bought Pop-Tarts.
Really? We have Pop-Tarts
We
now?
have Pop-Tarts.
Oh my god.
2 boxes.
Alright. Well, do we also have cornflakes? Because we have some Coke in the fridge downstairs.
Cornflakes and Coke are a well-balanced breakfast.
So anyway, Mark ends up actually getting with Gina, who is described as really sexy, short, with black hair down to her waist.
Yeah, there's about a foot difference between Gina and Mark.
She's really popular at school, but they're actually really hitting it off. There's some, like, legitimate connection there. We have not seen 2 people go at it in Fear Street like this before. Like, they're all over each other. It's pretty nuts. It was like the most genuine love affair we've seen so far. So Gina actually ends up being really cool because she basically saves the day. Is this the appropriate time to launch into the whole explanation of how she saves everybody?
Why don't we just tell our listeners to keep that in mind and move on to the next character?
Okay, yeah, so the next character is Roger. He's a distant cousin who is rooming with them, and he's supposed to be a student at a nearby college. He's also described by both Cara and Mark as being really beautiful and attractive and gorgeous, and it just, like...
It seems like every single person in this series
is
tends
really
to be
beautiful. Yeah, well, some of them. Not Ricky from the last book.
That's true.
And not Anna's brother from the first book. But this guy is like a hunk, apparently. And you're reading
Make this
it.
into a movie, please.
Right, but you're reading this and you're like, really? You guys are cousins.
They're distant cousins.
Distant cousins, and they're getting some serious vibes there. It's like, jeez. I mean, I don't know.
So Roger is also, he's kind of aloof. He's not only a distant cousin, he's also very distant.
I get it. He's a distant cousin, yeah.
So once Cara and Mark get a little suspicious of him because they see him going to a van in the middle of the night, they see him talking to weird people, they start going through his room and they realize his notebooks are empty. He doesn't have binders full of anything, no binders full of women. His books aren't highlighted, his walls aren't decorated, and there's a gun in his drawer.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like a regular college student. He's got basically a very Spartan room. He's got clothing in his drawers, a bunch of fake notebooks, unopened textbooks. And that's Mark's reply. He's like, listen, Cara, you're being too paranoid. I don't mark up my textbooks either. And who cares if he hasn't written his notebooks, you know? Some people are just like that. But when they go through all his drawers, because, you know, they're super paranoid at this point, they find his loaded gun. Roger is super suspicious. They actually end up confronting the guy in the van parked across the street and say, hey, what was Roger doing in your van?
And he goes, I don't know who Roger is.
Right, except later on, as we mentioned, Cara actually tracks Roger to a diner where he's meeting with this man, at which point you find out he's actually Murdoch, and...
He's Roger's supposed advisor in college.
Yeah, supposedly his advisor in college.
And Cara knows this is a lie because Murdoch has already told her, I don't know who Roger is.
Yep.
So there's this horribly awkward situation where she knows that something's wrong, they know that she knows, and she knows that they know.
So she immediately makes a plan to go back to the house and get Roger's gun and hide it somewhere else so that, you know, he can't do whatever nefarious thing that he's clearly about to do because he's been lying to her. Dun dun dun.
What I found was interesting about Cara's friendship with Meg is that, you know, they ended up studying together, and when Lisa finds out that Cara's parents are missing, Lisa offers to let Cara and Mark stay over. And I just thought, wow, Lisa's actually a really cool person. She lent Meg a year when she needed it. She's here for Cara. I like her.
Yeah, Lisa seems like a really chill girl that is still described as looking like Cher. So R.L. Stein's back at it again, except, you know, this time we're just harkening back to a description we heard in the first book.
Anyways, Roger and Murdoch.
Roger and Murdoch are introduced, and now she's on her way back home. She needs to get the gun, and she's being followed by headlights, but it's dark and it's at night, and she being Cara, obviously. She's really afraid. She decides she's going to turn around and run back towards the car to find out what the car is. She obviously suspects it's the van, except it ends up being...
Captain Faraday, who was the same cop who was at the door for the party they were having.
Exactly. She expects it to be a police car when he asks her to get in for a ride back home, but it ends up being a regular car, except there's a police radio, or a radio tuned to a police frequency inside.
So they had already contacted Captain Faraday about their parents being missing at this point. You know, they met at the party. She said their parents weren't home, so he gave them his card, and then when their parents are still missing, they give him a call, and now they've run into him again. So this is not her first or one of her earlier interactions with him. She knows who this guy is at this point.
Right. She deeply believes that
She has a lot of faith in him.
Yeah. Unfounded, misplaced faith, because this guy...
So, unwinding everything, Roger is not their distant cousin.
Nope.
He's actually...
Oh, wait a second. Guys, wait a second. We forgot one
mom
character.
and dad?
No. Marcus. We gotta mention Marcus here. Before we unravel the entire plot, there's a point where... in the second day that their parents are missing, they decide they're going to go check out their parents' work. They take their parents' car and drive 2 towns over. Their parents are described as working at a company called Cranford Industries, or Cranford Corporation, perhaps? Cranford Corporation is some nondescript company that has very, very tight security, and they work on a lot of government
contracts.
And so they go over there, they somehow get through the security, and there's this really weird interaction. They get to the the secretary there, and they ask to speak to their parents, and she calls the personnel manager, who gives her some weird runaround and gives her another guy's phone number. She calls that guy. They have a long, heated discussion, which kids don't really hear, and she sends them to go talk to the CEO of the company, Marcus. And this is a big red flag. You don't show up at a company where your parents work just to see your parents. And a company of this size, right? Huge parking lot, security, all kinds of different departments. The CEO comes to talk to you, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to put everything straight. I'm going to let you talk to your parents. And then, oh no, it turns out they've never worked here. Yeah, I'm so sorry for you. Such BS. Again, Cara falls for it somehow.
There's a whole scene where she just goes, our parents never worked here? What's going on?
Yeah, it's really weird. And so they actually start doubting their parents. Maybe our parents lied to us. It's actually a pretty terrifying book. I mean, like, we're just going to get into the in-depth plot discussion at this point.
Wait, no. Can I just unravel all character stuff at this point? Distant cousin Roger is not a distant cousin. Mom and dad don't work at aren't computer mainframe people.
Oh, they do work
I mean, that is not
Cranford Tech or whatever.
That is not what they're there for.
Right, they're actually undercover.
Yeah, mom and dad are FBI agents. Roger is an FBI agent. Murdoch is their field supervisor. Marcus is the leader of a cult, which Gina's father is also part of.
Right.
Which is why mom and dad didn't want their son dating Gina, because her dad is a major player in this cult.
Right, and everything fits neatly together except that Faraday's the one giant random factor that nobody accounted for.
Didn't they get him on racketeering charges or something?
Yeah, he's actually a crooked cop that they sent away to jail, and he ended up busting out, and now he's hell-bent on revenge.
Yeah, so I heard a lot of what the fuck when I heard you reading this, and I know my reaction when I was reading this book was, what am I reading? What the hell? So let's get into it.
Yeah, so this book is really just edge of your seat, thrilling book, and then the ending is just this cascading like series of, you know how in Mission Impossible when they take their masks off, it's as if somebody's taking their mask off, and then underneath that is another mask. They take that mask off, and then they take the other mask off. It becomes like a Monty Python skit of like a crescendo of WTF moments towards the end. It's really amazing.
So let's break it down.
Yeah, let's break it down. Basically, what happens is, at the end, they come home after talking to one of their parents' co-workers, Wally. This is where they find out that, wait a second, their parents actually do work at Cranford. They weren't lying to us. They really did disappear, and it was Marcus, the CEO of Cranford, who lied to us, and we have to tell the cops. Faraday's gonna really help us out here. They come back home, only to find Roger has been
shot in the back of his head
with a bow. There's an arrow sticking out of him, and just blood. Is the most gory scene in the entire Fear Street series thus far. As they're like staring in shock at his dead body, Faraday steps out from behind the door and accuses Mark of murdering.
With bow in hand, he says, "Why did you do it, son? Why did you kill him?"
Yeah, is this your bow? And they're like, what? No. He takes him downstairs. He's about to like, quote unquote, interrogate them when Murdoch busts out with his gun drawn and says, freeze! Don't move!
And then Faraday pulls out a gun and then pumps Murdoch full of bullets.
Yeah, he just pumps him full of lead. Is like pretty crazy. And then he's like, oh, I knew you guys didn't do it. Let me call the police department for backup. So he takes the phone off the hook. He's like, oh guys, you gotta get down here real quick. We got two men down, blah blah blah.
So throughout the entire book, their phone has been in and out of service.
On the fritz.
At this point, their phone doesn't have service. When Mark takes the opportunity to get a drink of water, he realizes, hang on, there's no service. This guy was not actually calling the cops.
Yeah, he picks up the phone. There's no dial tone. And so he comes back, and now it's a big role reversal because he's the one that's on to Faraday's bullshit while Cara is totally lapping it up. And he's trying to hint to her that this guy's not for real, but he actually ends up blurting out, don't trust him, he's a liar. And now, like, Faraday's onto their bullshit. Everything comes to a head. They're about to get killed when all of a sudden...
in comes Gina, who at this point, she was actually sent away to her aunt's house to keep her away from, her dad wanted to keep her away from everything that was happening. So she actually has come back just to save Mark and Cara and their parents from what is about to happen.
Yeah, she's holding a rifle. When Faraday's like, oh, high school girl with a rifle, whatever, she just like shoots one right past his head, blows a hole in the wall, and he's like, oh crap. He like basically shits his pants and drops his gun.
What he didn't take into account was that Gina has been hunting since she was 4 years old.
Yeah, she's a crack shot, and that was just like a warning shot across his bow, and he's like, oh fuck. Yeah, shit's for real. What happens is she tells him, hurry, there's no time to lose. Your parents are in grave danger. What do we do about Faraday? So what they do is they lock Faraday in a Faraday cage. They lock him up in the garage. They run across the woods to Gina's house, which is incidentally where this cult has been meeting this whole time.
Now, they've been meeting in Fear Woods. They need to go to Gina's house because this cult has robes where there's more robes in Gina's house, so they can pretend they're part of the cult by putting on the robes and then joining the cult in their ceremony.
Right, but their meeting place is like right behind her house.
Yeah, but that's a huge plot point that we haven't talked about yet.
Right, actually, yeah, so Mark actually stumbles upon that place earlier on when Gina tries to call to warn him about it.
Earlier in the day, she calls him to break up, and he's inconsolable. He's really upset about this. He doesn't understand why she would break up with him. And then later, he gets a phone call where she's basically screaming,
I need to talk to you. There's something I have to tell you. And then, like,
silence.
There's a struggle, and then the phone gets hung up. Basically.
Mark is really worried, and he just runs to Gina's house to help her. But he has to go through Fear Woods to get to Gina's house because it's the fastest way to get there. As he's running through the woods, first he hears this noise that makes him panic. And then he ends up falling into this massive hole in the ground. And then a dog is in the hole trying to attack him. Around the dog's neck, there's actually a monkey skull with rhinestones in its eyes.
Yep, he kills the dog.
Yeah, there's this scene where he realizes that either the dog's gonna kill him or he needs to kill the dog.
I read that scene twice. It was really intense. This is basically, we mentioned earlier that both Cara and Mark are badasses. This is his badass moment. He takes on this giant dog and just breaks its back, or breaks its neck maybe. He breaks its spinal column in some form and just kills it, and that was that.
Yeah, he dispatched the dog, hurried on over to Gina's house where he tried to climb up the trellis, cut his hand.
Climbed up anyway. Her dad almost shot him with a gun.
Well, if you heard some weird footsteps in your daughter's room, if you had a daughter, would you not walk in with a gun?
Yeah.
Gina's dad is a doctor. He offers to fix up Mark's hand. Mark says no. And he basically says, you know, Gina was really upset about your breakup. I had to send her away. Mark's no reason to argue with her father about that.
Going back to the present tense, Gina gets them all these fake cult robes, and they hurry over to the woods, which is exactly the same spot where Mark was earlier. It's like giant circle of hooded robed people, and they're all chanting their cult stuff.
And they're all holding a monkey head.
Exactly,
with glowing eyes.
Cara's and Mark's parents are about to get executed.
Right, because Marcus, the head of the company, who is also the head of the cult, has discovered that they've been infiltrated by the FBI, so they need to sacrifice these FBI agents.
They were basically going to start off their huge plan by killing these FBI agents, and then they were going to, I don't know, implement their plan to make America safe again, I believe is how it's referred to in the book.
The slogan for the cult is Make America Safe Again, and they plan on doing that by ridding America of...
By the way, they're actually referred to as the White Monkey Brotherhood. They were going to stockpile weapons, to take the law into their own hands, to kill people. Now we are ready, Marcus shouted. We of the White Monkey are ready to take back the America that is ours. For too long, we have stood by while others determined our nation's fate. No longer, no longer. Soon we shall rise up and take back by force what is ours. He kept his arms raised high as he talked. The government of this nation has given in to criminals, but we are going to change that. Our revenge will be swift and our justice will reign. No criminal will be safe once our army has proven its capabilities. We will take back our community and our nation from the criminal element by force. Basically,
For the greater good.
yeah, no to the courts, no to the weak-kneed police, yes to the Brotherhood. They're going to talk about law and order. They're going to enforce law and order through their weird Make America Safe Again cult. Great.
So Marcus is going to use a knife and slash their father's throat. Mark has to react quickly. So what he does is he has the monkey's skull in his pocket. He decides to throw the skull at Marcus and try to hit him in the head, but he misses, and what it does is just sort of flies right by Marcus. Marcus just goes, "Who threw that?" while looking straight at Mark. Cara, Mark, and Gina all realize we need to do something right now.
But actually, it was their parents that reacted quickly.
The distraction was enough time for Mr. and Mrs. Smith to spring to action.
They disarm the man who has, like, a gun held to them, and they, like, basically kick Marcus down to the ground.
And the entire group scatters.
Yeah, after they yell, FBI, you're all under arrest. Except for Gina's dad.
He basically goes, "You know what? I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
And I'll take responsibility that I need to take."
Exactly. And then they ask him, how'd you get involved with this crap anyway? And then he just uttered a weary sigh and said, I believed in what Marcus and the others were saying at first. I believed that we had to do something about crime, that we had to make the country safe again. But anyway, eventually he realized they were a bunch of crazy nut jobs that were just gonna, like, bring the country to ruin.
Do you think they wanted Shadyside to be one of the best towns in America, and the magazine that was going to rank them was coming soon?
Yeah, I think they were doing everything for the greater good.
For the greater good.
The greater good.
Greater good.
Yarp. All ends happily. Gina's dad does kind of have to go to jail. He's probably gonna, like, testify against the cult and probably gonna get a break. But she goes to live with her mom in Detroit, and she leaves her address with Mark. Mark and Cara are also moving away because their parents got reassigned. That's basically it. I made a couple of notes here. Actually, I marked up this whole book because there's so much to talk about. One funny thing happened during the party where it's mentioned that Corey was talking to Cara or Mark about some weird thing that happened in the Fear Street Woods that he read in a newspaper. What newspaper does Corey read? He's always talking about something he read in a newspaper about the Fear Street Woods.
Well, don't they talk about the Shadyside Gazette?
Maybe, but he's always the one that's reading these weird stories in there. Another one...
Arnie is also mentioned in this book, and he tells Mark about crazy stories of Fear Street Woods, too.
That's true. Yeah, that's Arnie's little shout out there. There's a really funny moment where I mentioned earlier they surprise Roger in their parents' bedroom, and he's looking super suspicious and hiding behind the curtains. Kara's like, what are you doing here? And he gives, like, this complete BS excuse, right? Just totally not believable. Oh, I was just staring out the window, enjoying the scenery. And Mark is like, oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds believable. It's really funny because the character is supposed to be really gullible, and this is the most gullible thing I've ever read anybody doing. So that was funny. Talking about 90s references, the kids go downstairs to make themselves some breakfast, and there's no milk, so they pour Coke in their cereal.
How's that a 90s reference?
I mean, I used to do that sometimes.
I don't think that's a 90s thing. I think that's a dumb kids thing.
Okay, whatever. Anyway, that's something that happens sometime. Mainframe computers. Setting up mainframe computers, it takes a few months, sometimes a couple years to install a computer system in a company. Yeah, 90s things. Why don't we talk about the Fear Street mythos?
Well, I was going to ask about, remember how when their phone was out, Cara wanted to make a phone call, so she went to a neighbor's house, and the neighbor's acting very suspiciously. Do you think she was a member of that cult?
Maybe. Yeah, because of the whole parents thing. She mentioned, like, her parents. She was like, what? Your parents? Yeah, could be. So another weird thing was, one of the incidents they mentioned was this giant mutant guinea pig in the Fear Street Woods that attacked a group of 5 kids that were camping out in the woods. This is actually kind of, I guess this is what I thought the last book would be. Kids camped out, 5 kids camped out in the Fear Street Woods or whatever, and a giant guinea pig is attacked. This is going back to the whole mutated animals theme. There was supposed to be a lot of mutated animals on Fear Island, but a giant guinea pig, this is like next level mutation, and this is right at ground zero, Fear Street Woods themselves. And what do you guys think about Cranford Corporation?
What I thought really fit into our Mystery Inc. theory was basically when they were talking about how the parents do a lot of setups and how they set something up and they have to leave and set something up would have to leave. And I just thought, wow, they're setting something up for this corporation that's doing stuff in Fear Woods.
That's what I thought so too. Cranford Corporation seems super shady. Yes, their CEO was involved in some dirty dealings with this cult, but the rest of the corporation itself is close proximity to Shady Side.
2 towns over.
And their huge security, lots of government contracts. It seems like the CEO knows his way around the Fear Street Woods. Maybe he knows a little something about the Fear Street Woods, having had his thumbs in the Cranford Corporation
Well,
pie.
the thing about the rhinestone eyes for the monkeys, rhinestone doesn't glow in the dark, and
No,
it was
it
some
doesn't.
weird stone that they couldn't figure out. I mean, maybe that's what they're mining from Fear Woods.
Could be.
Great energy source.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, maybe it's like uranium or something. Who knows what that is?
If it's uranium, maybe it's something that's addling their minds, and that's why they decided to form a cult.
Right, and that would also explain all the weird mutations. I wonder if the Wally character is going to come back. He works at Cranford Corporation. He is really involved in their skunk works. He's supposed to be pulling long shifts in the basement, working on some kind of project. Who knows what's going on there, right?
Well, adding to the Fear Street mythos, we hear the Guardians of Fear Street.
Oh, you're talking about the howling?
Yeah, you hear howling a few times.
Yeah, that could be it. Or that could have been that dog.
Well, you hear 2 things howling at one point.
Oh, so maybe the one dog is howling at the other dog. Aren't dogs not supposed to be able to howl?
Well, yeah, they said it didn't sound like a dog. Mark specifically said that.
That's weird. You know what? Maybe the Guardians of Fear Street are still there. That might be a stretch. Maybe we're just trying to pat ourselves on the back here for predicting something.
I do think one of the dogs is the Guardian.
Could be. Yeah, there are
From the
2
first
dogs.
book.
One's dead and another one might still be around. You're right.
I gotta say, none of the stories have ever been substantiated. The giant guinea pig, or people getting attacked, or disappearing, or murdered, all the stuff that Corey reads in his supposed newspaper, none of this stuff you ever see it firsthand.
I think it'd be the Beacon, because that's the newspaper that comes into play in the overnight
Right.
that Pete brings in.
Okay, so this is like what's the newspaper in Harry Potter that's written by Luna Lovegood's dad?
Oh, the Quibbler?
This is like the Quibbler, right?
It would be Fear Woods that has a creepy-ass cult, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But I guarantee you the newspaper won't report that one.
That's you're thinking that there would still be a staff in the newspaper after everything happens.
Yeah, we were actually thinking about this. How many of the parents in town were in this cult already, and now they're just gone?
So Cara and Mark could have potentially ruined the lives of a ton of their classmates, but it doesn't matter because they're leaving town.
Yeah, and also they saved their parents' lives, so really, in the balance, I don't think they care. Those other kids can visit their parents in the penitentiary. It'll be fine.
What did you think of this book?
I really liked it. Despite me screaming WTF at the end on multiple occasions. Because the thing is, like, it was so back to back to back. It was like, Roger's dead. OMG. Faraday steps out from behind the door. OMG. Murdoch busts in with a gun. OMG. Murdoch dies. OMG again. Faraday turns out to be a fake policeman. OMG.
That was predictable.
I did not see that coming.
Really?
No, I didn't. And then Gina busts in and saves the day. OMG, OMG, OMG. It was like,
Them being FBI agents.
yeah.
Oh.
At that point, that was predictable. But that earlier sequence is all in like 1 or 2 chapters, and it was just like a series of masks being pulled off, and it was really awesome. The book up till that point was actually really good too, because it actually touched upon one of my great childhood fears, which is, my parents are out late, they're at work, and they haven't come home yet, and I'm really worried. There's one point in the book that really struck a chord with me. I believe this is Cara, and she's thinking, what if I'm an orphan? I thought. What if I'm already an orphan and I just don't know it yet? Honestly, going back to my childhood in the 90s, sometimes my parents both worked late at night, and I'd just stay up by the window and just watch for their car to come back like 11 or 12 at night, and I'd be really worried. And so this really struck a chord with me, that this whole plot of them being worried, where were their parents, why were their parents missing, is really a big fear that I often, had growing up. If my parents were out working late. Give us a shout out in the comments, guys. Did any of you also have this fear growing up? Your parents were out late for some reason, and you're like, started imagining all the horrible scenarios, like, what if they got in a car accident? What if something happened? Am I ever gonna see them again? Like,
What's the craziest scenario you ever thought up?
yeah, give us a shout out, guys.
How many monkey heads with rhinestones would you give it?
I would give this a solid 3 monkey heads with rhinestones. Yeah, so far, this is my favorite novel.
After you downgraded the rest, right?
I already, yes, in a previous Rando cast, if you guys want to check it out on YouTube, our first Rando cast ended up downgrading all of my ratings
thus far.
I gave this 3 out of 5 monkey skull heads.
Wow, really? Okay, but you didn't downgrade all the
I didn't downgrade the previous
okay,
ones.
so is this your favorite or?
I had a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah, the end kind of threw you though, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Because my reaction was also, what am I reading?
I guess my what am I reading was a little more positive than your what am I reading.
No, mine was positive as well.
All right.
Because usually I can catch things before, and I didn't. Roger death or the Murdoch death. I caught the Faraday thing, but...
Okay, but Gina...
Yeah, Gina coming in.
With a rifle.
Yeah.
Just like, booyah. Man, that was cool. I'm really cheering for Gina and Mark. I hope they make it work.
Long distance.
Long distance. Hey, it's tough, especially at that age.
We're going to do predictions for the next book, which is The Wrong Number. It says, it began as a prank and ended in murder.
So I guess somebody calls for pizza, but what happened was, actually they didn't even want the pizza, right? They prank dialed the pizza place to deliver like 12 pies to some address, their friend's address probably, just as a joke, except they dialed the wrong number. It wasn't the pizzeria, they dialed a serial killer's place. And so the serial killer goes to their friend's house and murders their friend. And now they're like, OMG, what happened? What's your prediction?
What do you think the murder weapon's going to be?
Pizza.
And the murderer is a
serial killer guy that is not actually a pizza delivery man, but has like a bunch of pizza. Really? Why does he have pizza? Maybe that doesn't make sense.
Is he the guy from Seven that's like the gluttony one?
No. Okay, never mind. The murder weapon is not pizza. Doesn't make any sense. I got caught up in my own little prediction story there. The murder weapon's going to be a knife.
And it's going to be a male?
Yeah, it's going to be a male. And if it's not a knife, it's one of those roly pizza cutter things. But they're definitely going to get like stabbed in the neck with one or the other of those.
The cover is 2 teenage girls. They're having a slumber party.
I think one of them's Lisa.
And they're on the phone. So they're obviously prank calling someone. I'm going to say they're prank calling some guy. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I like you, hee hee hee. Because we totally did that as teenage girls.
Did you?
No.
Okay. But the guy ends up dead.
Yeah, the guy ends up dead.
Intended target of the prank ends up dead. We both think that's going to happen.
So the guy that they prank call ends up dead. I'll say that the murder weapon... I like the knife one. It feels right for this, but I'll say strangulation, just to be different. And
Ooh.
Yeah. And I also think they live on Fear Street, or someone lives on Fear Street, because I can see...
Woods.
I can see a tree, but there's no streetlights on, and they're old Victorian-looking homes. So I'll say they're making a prank call from someone's house on Fear Street at a slumber party. They're calling a guy, and then the guy ends up dead by being strangled.
I think we're both onto something.
Strangled by another guy.
Whoa. Okay, so we both think it's a male murder. I'm feeling pretty confident about my pizza prediction because there's been a lot of pizza in Fear Street so far. People go and eat pizza or go to pizza parlors and drink a Coke quite often. So...
All right.
All right. I'll see you guys next week.
Tune in for pizza murders.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for listening to another thrilling episode of RetRead Podcast.
If you like what you hear, give us a shout out.
If not, let us know why in the comments.
Don't forget to rate, review, comment, share, like, and subscribe.
You can follow us at RetRead Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.
Or send suggestions or fan mail to red.read.podcast@gmail.com.
Until next time.
Peace!